She thought he'd leave. That thought gnawed at her relentlessly as she stood at the edge of the hospital corridor, her hands trembling, her heart a mixture of hope and dread. Elizabeth Carter had faced many storms in her 32 years, divorces, betrayals, the lonely nights after her parents' death, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Her life had been reduced to a series of what-ifs and if-onlys since her divorce 2 years ago, and now, standing in the cold, sterile hospital hallway of St. Jude's Medical Center in Ohio, she wondered if this would be yet another chapter where love quietly slipped away without notice. The soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beeping of monitors created a rhythm that somehow matched the anxiety thumping inside her chest. From across the corridor, Daniel Matthews approached, his stride purposeful yet uncertain, as if he were balancing on the thin line between stepping forward and walking away. Elizabeth's mind raced with memories of their time together, moments that felt like a lifetime ago and yet were etched in her heart with vivid clarity. She remembered the night Daniel had stayed up beside her when she was sick, the way he'd held her hand in silence, never needing words, and now, after months of awkward silences and missed calls following her messy divorce, here he was again. The tension was palpable, a weight pressing down on both of them. If you believe in kindness and second chances, make sure to like this video, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Elizabeth took a deep breath, forcing herself to look at him. Daniel's eyes, the same deep hazel she remembered, flickered with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Was it doubt, regret, or the hope she desperately clung to for months? She had carried the burden of shame and fear that he would reject her now. After seeing the scars left behind by her past, after learning the harsh truths about the mistakes she had made, her daughter, little Emma, had been her beacon through it all, her reason to smile when the nights were darkest. But even Emma's laughter could not always quiet the storm in Elizabeth's heart. Daniel stopped a few feet away, his gaze dropping for a moment before meeting hers again. "Elizabeth," he started, his voice low, measured, but even that slight utterance sent a jolt through her. She felt the walls she had built around herself tremble, threatening to collapse under the weight of possibility. The memory of their last encounter haunted her. It had been an argument, the kind that leaves permanent scars. Words spoken in anger had spiraled out of control, and she had felt the door close behind him, both physically and emotionally, in the months that followed. She tried to rebuild herself, not just for her, but for Emma. But a part of her had always remained frozen in that moment, waiting for Daniel to come back, wondering if he ever would. Elizabeth swallowed hard, bracing herself for the pain she feared would come. But before either of them could speak further, the sound of rapid footsteps echoed down the hallway. Her heart skipped a beat as Emma, barely 6 years old but full of fearless innocence, darted around the corner. "Mom," she shouted, her little voice urgent. Determined, she skidded to a stop in front of Daniel and looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Please wait for my mom." Time seemed to stop. Elizabeth's heart leapt in her chest, and even Daniel froze, caught off guard by the purity of the plea. It wasn't just a child asking for her mother. It was a small, innocent voice demanding love, connection, and hope. Elizabeth felt tears sting her eyes as she watched Emma tug gently at Daniel's hand, her tiny fingers a bridge between the past and a future still possible. In that moment, Elizabeth realized that life was often unpredictable in the most beautiful ways. The child she had fought so hard to protect, the little girl whose laughter had been her shield, had unwittingly become a messenger of hope. Daniel bent down, his eyes softening as he looked into Emma's earnest face. He took a deep breath, and for the first time that day, Elizabeth saw him truly present. Without judgment, without fear, without hesitation, their world, which had felt fragile and uncertain, suddenly seemed to hold a promise of something stronger. She remembered the nights when Daniel had comforted her after Emma's father, her ex-husband, had abandoned them, the nights when he had quietly supported them without ever asking for anything in return. She realized now that his love had always been steady, waiting patiently. Even when she doubted herself, the corridor was silent, except for the small, determined footsteps of Emma and the slow, deliberate breathing of two adults standing on the edge of a new beginning. Elizabeth approached. Slowly, her eyes fixed on Daniel, each step she took felt heavy with history, yet light with hope. She thought of the countless nights spent imagining this moment, fearing it might never come, and yet, here it was, tangible, fragile, and yet undeniable. Daniel reached out, not to confront, not to judge, but to meet her in the space they had both been longing for. His hand hovered near hers, a question and an answer all at once. Elizabeth took it, trembling, as if holding on to him could make her whole again. Emma, sensing the shift, squealed with joy and clung to both of them, her arms wrapping around their intertwined hands. It was chaotic, imperfect, and beautiful, a snapshot of life reclaiming itself after pain and fear as they stood. There, the years of misunderstandings, the fear, the guilt and the shame began to dissolve. Elizabeth felt a warmth she hadn't known. She needed a reassurance that love sometimes arrives not as a thunderclap, but as a gentle, persistent heartbeat that refuses to leave. Daniel's eyes glistened, reflecting a mix of relief, love, and quiet admiration for the strength Elizabeth had shown, not just in surviving her past, but in raising a daughter who had taught them both about courage and faith. It had not been easy. Elizabeth had struggled with nights where she questioned her worth, nights where loneliness seemed to echo louder than laughter, nights where Emma's small voice had been the only reason she clung to hope, and Daniel too had wrestled with his own doubts, fearing that re-entering her life might reopen wounds or that he would be rejected once more. But life had a way of proving that love, when genuine, could endure even the harshest tests. The hospital hallway, once a place of anxiety and uncertainty, now felt almost sacred. The ordinary flickering lights seemed to glow with significance, marking the moment when two lives, fractured by fear, began to heal. Elizabeth felt the weight of her past lift slightly, not completely gone, for scars don't disappear overnight, but softened by the presence of someone willing to stand beside her, despite everything. Over the following weeks, their reunion transformed from a tentative reconnection into something steady and life-affirming. Daniel became a constant in their lives again, not replacing the past, but enriching the present. He would help Emma with her homework, read bedtime stories with exaggerated voices that made her laugh until her cheeks hurt, and stand silently beside Elizabeth when the memories of her past threatened to overwhelm her. Together, they built a new rhythm, a rhythm that acknowledged pain but celebrated resilience, a rhythm that honored love but respected the fragility of healing hearts. Elizabeth, once fearful that love might evade her forever, discovered a courage she hadn't known. She possessed. It was Emma's fearless plea, her insistence that her mother was worth waiting for, that had shattered the last of her doubts, and Daniel, who had quietly lingered at the edge of her life, finally stepped fully into the light, proving that second chances weren't just a fairy tale. They were real, and sometimes they arrived when you least expected them. Carried on the small, determined feet of a child. If this story touched your heart, please engage with this video, like, comment, and share it to inspire someone else today. Your support helps stories like this reach more people who need hope and courage. Elizabeth never forgot that day. Every time she walked down that hospital corridor in the years that followed, she remembered the exact moment when love had chosen to stay. She remembered Emma's tiny hands reaching out, Daniel's hesitant yet hopeful gaze, and the fragile, overwhelming truth that life's most extraordinary moments often come wrapped in the simplest acts of courage. From that day forward, she carried a newfound belief that no matter how dark the past or uncertain the future, there would always be a moment, a heartbeat, a plea, a touch that could change everything. And in that belief, Elizabeth, Emma, and Daniel found not just love, but a family, whole in its imperfections, radiant in its resilience, and unshakable in its hope. Before you leave, I have a special request. Comment below and share the moment in your life where hope or love surprised you. Your story might inspire someone else. Today, life, as Elizabeth learned, doesn't always give second chances, but when it does, it's often the small, unexpected voices, the quiet persistence of love, and the courage to wait that changed everything. She thought he'd leave, but thanks to her little girl, he stayed. And in that moment, everything changed. Forever.